Jewish journey through the Gospel of John. We have been traveling through the Gospel of John at a relaxed pace, trying to squeeze out every bit of juice from the Jewish journey. It's a juicy Jewish journey through the Gospel of John that we possibly can. And each week we review that which we have previously studied together, the last week's step on our journey together. And this week we shall continue our tradition. And by doing so, we will dim the lights and prepare for a brief video that will recall to mind that which we looked at last week. So previously, on a Jewish journey through the Gospel of John. Well, let's continue then, now that we're brought up to speed. Just to remind you, we looked at Judaism's most popular false messiahs. Jesus accused them and said, if someone else comes in his own name, you'll follow him. And indeed, the Jewish people have done so. Shimon bar Chochba, Moses of Crete, Yemenite Messiah, Shabbatai of Zvi, and of course, most recently, Menachem Mendel Schneerson. There are many who follow, but refuse to follow Yeshua. And we looked at John's witnesses, or Yeshua's witnesses, John the Baptist being one of them, Yeshua's works being the next, the Father as a witness, the Scriptures themselves as the witness, and none other than the exalted, the great Moses. So where two witnesses or three were required in the Torah for all things to be established, Yeshua lays out 5. And, of course, Moses being the most intense one, because the Scriptures, if you do not believe the Scripture, and boy, that was fantastic at the end, the whisper. If you don't believe the Scriptures, how will you believe what I say? Now, after these things, sometime after these things, people get very, very caught up in looking for a very tight chronological account. John's not giving you a very tight chronological account. This is months later, many months later. Doesn't matter how many months, doesn't matter exactly how much time. All we can tell you is that he was in Jerusalem for the festival, and now he is here in Galilee after these things. So the next thing, in other words, that I want to talk about, John is writing. Here's what happened. Here's how it went down. Jesus, Yeshua, went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. For those of you who have been to Israel, you might remember this beautiful Sea of Galilee. If we look on the map, we see the Sea of Galilee here. It's called the Sea of Tiberias because this is the major city that is on this area. Jesus is going to go to the other side. Herod Antipas is in charge of this region. Philip is in charge of this region. So he's going toward the northeast end of the Sea of Galilee. Another picture you can see, actually, I wanted you to see the mountainous regions that surround. This is the beginning of the Golan Heights. There are mountainous regions. We would call them, well, in Dallas, they're mountainous regions. Colorado would say they're just speed bumps, but foothills, we could think of them as perhaps. And a large crowd followed him. And Jesus wants to get away to a quiet place, but he can't. A large crowd follows him, and why do they follow him? Well, we've seen this reason before. This is the very popular reason to follow Jesus thus far in the book of John, and one that does not reach approval or achieve approval status of approval by Yeshua. They saw the signs. They were impressed by the miracles, the works that Yeshua's done, and it's attracting a large crowd. Not so much his teaching, not so much his work, not so much what he claims about himself, which is really what we had to wrestle with in the previous chapter, but the signs which he was performing on those who were sick. So again, we have multiple signs. John does not record multiple signs. There are many signs, in other words, that John is not recording here, that he's assuming you understand. The other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they've recorded many of them, but there are still more signs that are unrecorded by any of the Gospels, just because Jesus' work was characterized by these miraculous signs. As John says at the end, we're going to include them all, there's not enough room in the libraries in all the world for all the books of miracles that he would have done. Anyway, this is why they're following him. We already know that's not a great reason for Jesus. Jesus is not going to be so excited about the crowds following him because of the signs, but nonetheless, let's see what his reaction is going to be. The signs are a big issue in John. Jesus went up on the mountain, on the hill, and there he sat down with his disciples. He'd hoped for a little peace, not going to get it. This is yours truly 25 years ago, sitting on that same, in the same mountain, reading the Gospels. How the mighty have fallen. All right, now, as the text continues, now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, the Jewish festival, in other words, was near. Now, this verse is actually very important. Remove this verse from the passage, and it's my contention you cannot understand the entirety of the chapter 6, because chapter 6 is predicated on this taking place during the period of time leading up to the Passover. It's not during Passover. It says the feast was near. It's the period immediately preceding the Jewish festival. If it were Passover, he wouldn't be in Galilee at all. He would be in Jerusalem. But this is leading up to that period of time. And in fact, you will remember that the book of John is organized around Jewish festivals. The discourses, the miracles, the teachings of Jesus are predicated upon what festival, what holiday is occurring at the time. This is how John arranges the book. So if you try to remove a holiday from the passage, you remove the reason for that passage. It's like pulling out the tablecloth from the table, and instead of doing it skillfully, everything crashes to the floor. The first 2, 3, and 4 are predicated around Passover. Chapter 5, it's predicated around a festival. It's not mentioned because that's the issue. The issue is Shabbat. Shabbat is the holiday on which that chapter is predicated on. And chapter 6 is based upon Passover. We talked early on in our discussions on John that this is a high context piece of literature. In other words, John presumes that you know a tremendous amount of Jesus' life and ministry. You know the basic structure of the events around Jesus. This is not designed for first-timers who are first meeting Jesus. This is a more in-depth. Furthermore, it assumes that you have a knowledge of the Jewish holidays. It assumes you have a basic knowledge of the Hebrew Bible, Jewish customs, etc. So when he says that Passover is near, it is not that he's giving you a chronological time marker, and that's what, hey, and I'll tell you, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon as well. That's not his concern. His concern is theological, is thematic. When he says it's Sabbath, and when we hear it was Sabbath, what do we hear in our heads? Dun, dun, dun. When it's Passover, we hear Dayenu. No, we understand what Passover is. I wonder, as a reader, your job is to say, I wonder what Passover is going to have to do with the events that are going to occur between now and the next holiday that John throws in. Well, Jesus looks up and he sees a crowd. There we go. Jesus looks up and he sees a crowd coming to him. Imagine you're sitting there on a nice contemplative hillside like you saw my picture just a moment ago. Nice lapping of the waves in the background. The sun is shining. You've got some quiet time. You've got some downtime with your disciples. But Jesus looks up and he sees, a large crowd is coming toward me, and I've got a decision to make. What is the decision he makes? Mark tells us, gives us, you know that all four Gospels record this event, the feeding of the 5,000. This miracle, this event, is the only one that is actually repeated and recorded in all four Gospels. Is that coincidence? Is that happenstance? What is the significance of the feeding of the 5,000? Is it that Jesus is an extraordinary magician then why didn't they all record the changing of the water into wine? That was a tremendous presto changeo action. Why is John the only one who recorded that? Why is this passage, this miracle, the one that is emphasized by all four? Let's see. Well, Mark gives us some insight into what Jesus was thinking. The people saw them going. Many recognized they were ran there together on foot from all the cities. As you can see, the Sea of Galilee, it's not a large sea. And so if you're sitting on this, and you can see the boats passing by, and you can, on foot, you can trace, if you're walking, you can trace the progress of a boat. And you can see where it's landing. And you can eventually, on foot, you can make it around the shore to where they are. So there's once you're on the Sea of Galilee, it's very hard to hide from people's eyes on the shore. So the people saw them going. Many recognized their boat and ran there together on foot from all the surrounding cities. And they got there ahead of them. And Jesus went ashore, and he saw a large crowd. He felt compassion for them. These are the thought patterns. This is the reaction. John doesn't give us the reaction. It's not his point. Mark gives us the insight. Jesus felt compassion for them. Why? Because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. There's a reason that Mark includes this particular phrase. They are like sheep without a shepherd. It's the same reason that John records that it was near Passover. Both Gospels are attempting to get you to understand something about what Jesus is doing. In this instance, the Mark passage, he felt compassion because they were sheep without a shepherd. When it was already late, his disciples came to him and said, "This place is desolate, quite already late. Send them away." So they go into the surrounding countryside, the villages, buy themselves something to eat. Well, if we go back to Numbers, and this is a passage we actually looked at in our Torah portion several weeks ago. This is the passing from Moses to Joshua, the leadership of the people of Israel, going to cross the Jordan River and enter the land, which Moses cannot do. Moses must pass over his mantle and pass on his authority to his successor, to the one who would lead the people in his stead. And this is the passage. Pay close attention and see if you see anything familiar. Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, "May the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation who will go out and come in before them, and who will lead them out and bring them in, so that the congregation of the Lord will not be like sheep which have no shepherd." Moses passed on his authority to the one who succeeded him. In this instance, chronologically, is Joshua, because the people of Israel needed a shepherd, the shepherd, and in fact, that's the connection that Mark is saying. Just as Moses was followed by Joshua For those who are paying attention, it will be very clear that Moses is followed by a superior Moses, by Yeshua, by Jesus. Therefore, Jesus, again, lifting up his eyes, seeing that a large crowd was coming to him. Now we can go on. He said to Philip, one of his disciples, one of the big 12, what are we to buy? Where are we to buy bread so that these may eat? Why does he ask this of Philip? Well, it actually makes quite good sense because Philip was a local boy. He was from Bethsaida, that's the area they were in, the city of Andrew and Peter. So you had three guys, the disciples, who had a background growing up in that area, Bethsaida. You had Andrew, Peter, brothers, and Philip. So he goes to Philip, a local boy. Where are we going to buy this? And if we look at the slide, this is the area of Bethsaida right here. Bethsaida right here. And the feeding of the 5,000 occurred right in that vicinity, as you can see. Just to make sure you know where we are geographically. Figure out the distance and the direction of this clicker. Well, so what Philip immediately thinks, where we're going to go buy bread, he thinks about the marketplace. And, wow, we really make somebody's day if we bought bread. We'll sell them out. In fact, we'll clean them out. And there aren't enough bakers in Bethsaida to be able to purchase bread from. Furthermore, there isn't enough money to do so. He says 200 denarii. What is a denarii? A denarius is 1 day's wage. So 1 day's wage, 200 working days. Okay, so 2/3 of a year worth of work of salary, 200 denarii worth of bread. If we put all the 2/3 of a year worth of bread, 200 working days, we couldn't possibly feed everyone. They wouldn't be able to even have just one bite, everyone to receive a little. What are we doing? Taking communion? A little crumb for everybody? You're looking to feed them. 200 denarii worth of bread is that. So it's interesting. He goes to the marketplace, and Jesus asks him, and Philip begins, he's a Jewish guy, he immediately takes out his abacus and begins to, which for those of you who don't know what an abacus is, it's an old calculator, it's an ancient calculator. He begins to calculate, 200, 20,000 people carry the three, can't be done. This, by the way, is a denarius. A denarius has the image of Caesar on it, not to be used in the temple. Render to Caesar what Caesar. If you want to buy bread, you got to use Caesar's face. Well, one of the disciples, Andrew, remember, Andrew also is from Bethsaida. Simon Peter's brother, said to them, well, I got a solution for you. There's a lad here. Maybe it's a boy. Maybe it's a young man. There's a flexibility about this term. We always picture him as a little boy. Maybe he's a little boy. It's a cute story. We tell the kids. Maybe he's a teenager. Maybe he's a teenager, and his mama made sure that he had some bread because he's got to build muscles 12 ways, right? But there's a lad here that we've been able to find. He's got 5 barley loaves. Barley loaves, that was the bread. That was poor bread, poor man's bread, right? That was the bottom of the barrel, barley loaves. High in fiber, though, I have to say. And he's got 2 fish, so it's a nice, 5 barley loaves, 2 fish. But what are these for so many? And so here we have a loaf. Now, that's actually too large a fish. That's the St. Peter's fish comes out of. That's actually a pretty good meal for an adult. That's not bad. The kid didn't have the lemon as far as I know. John left that one out. But these are smaller fish, more like sardines. But anyway, the point being, you got a couple of loaves, you got 5 loaves, and you got 2 fish from a kid. What is that? It's the Happy Meal. You're going to feed all these people with a happy meal. What are we going to do with a happy meal? We got 5,000 men. That means we probably have about 20,000 men, women, and children here, and we got one happy meal. I can't divide up one happy meal in one carful in my family without an argument breaking out. 20,000 people, a happy meal. Meanwhile, you got this kid who's saying, "Why, Jesus, why'd you take me lunch? Why did the man steal me lunch?" But point being, Jesus has they got a problem, and they're going to find a solution for it. They're going to find a solution. Yeshua says, have the people sit down. And there was much grass in the place. Now, if you've been to Israel, if you've been to the Galilee, especially, in the summertime, or in the wintertime, or in the fall, it is really hard to find nice green, Mark tells us, it's nice green grass. Very hard to find grass. And it's all brown and hard and stubby. You sit in it, it's prickly, it's uncomfortable. But because this is the springtime, this is March, there's plenty of green grass all around. So that is confirmation that this is indeed occurring somewhat prior to the Passover time, because it's the only time you're going to find the place covered with green grass. And so the men sat down. Again, men only, women and children stood. But they're discounting men, 5,000 guys. Okay, so men, women, children, all sitting down together. We've skipped a verse in the slides. Okay, chapter 6, verse 11. Don't spoil the ending here. Someone have their Bible. Someone open a Bible up. John, chapter 6, verse 11. Who's got it? Sword drill. You've got it. Go. Okay, that was, I'm sure, an awesome reading, but I, all the way over here, beyond the horizon, could not hear it. So, is there someone closer who can read that same passage? Yes. I see that hand. Who? Okay, good, thank you. I want to make sure we're on the same page together. All right. Are you telling me that Jesus took these kids' loaves, 5 loaves, and he gave thanks to God? You know how we would give thanks to God? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. He gave thanks to God. Okay, he gave thanks for them. What did he do then? He distributed them. Okay, so he started tearing them up into pieces. And here's a piece for you, here's a piece for you, here's a piece for you. I bet 5 loaves didn't go very far. Keep reading.
He distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down.
Okay, so he's tearing up 5 loaves. This is going to Andrew, this one's going to Peter. Okay, keep it going, okay, and
likewise of the fish.
And the fish, okay. Did that passage say, as much as they wanted? 5 loaves, 2 fish. They distributed them. By the time Jesus was done, the crowd of 20,000 ate as much as they want. It was an all-you-can-eat bread and fish buffet. Wow. With service from Jesus through the apostles to the crowd. That's pretty impressive. I read that as a reader, I say, I'm impressed. But let's see what happens. When they were filled, the crowd was filled. Jesus says to his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments. Leftover fragments? Come on. You just fed 20,000 people with 5 loaves. really, how much could be left over? Gather up the leftover fragments so that nothing will be lost. What does this mean? Jesus recycles, okay? It's very environmental, all right? Now, it doesn't say that. I'm just reading that. Just thrown in for nothing, no extra charge. All right, keep it green. All right. But so that nothing be lost. So they gathered the fragments up. And they filled 12 baskets. 12, count them 12, with fragments from the 5 barley loaves. Because let's face it, you can't keep the fish. It's going to stink. But the loaves, you can get some. Well, they kept the fragment, gathered up 12 baskets of the 5 barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten. Wow. Which means that Jesus and the disciples did a whole lot of extra distributing they didn't need to do. All right, but that's good to know. 12 baskets were collected. So this is what a basket looks like. Now, that's not the 12 disciples right there, okay? This is why the women in the Middle East, they're tough. All have they don't need to do Pilates, right? Their life is Pilates. They all have strong cores, carrying baskets on their head. All right. So the question is, why 12 baskets? And each one of the Gospels, in recording this miracle, they record the 12 baskets. That's an interesting detail. Why 12? Why do they record that there were 12 baskets of fragments left over? Choice number 1. Because there were 12 baskets of fragments left over. Because that's how many there were, right? Truth in advertising. Choice number 2. 1 basket was all that each disciple could carry. 12 disciples, they each had a basket, a tisket, a tasket. That's all they could carry. So 12 baskets. Third choice, a symbol that none of the 12 tribes, none of Israel's tribes would be lost, so that nothing be lost. And the fourth reason, and this is actually the one that I lean to, again, but you can make your own mind up on this one. The 12 baskets are a symbol that Israel's Messiah can more than sufficiently supply the needs of the 12 tribes of Israel. There they are, Chagall's famous, beautiful windows that he painted that are in stained glass windows in Jerusalem at the Hadassah Hospital. Therefore, when the people saw the sign which he had performed, they said, "This is truly the prophet who is to come into the world." Now, we've seen that phrase, the prophet, before. We've seen this many times. In fact, in John, you will see it many more times, the phrase, the prophet. And they are identifying Yeshua because of what he did with the bread and the fish, the loaves and the fishes, that he is the prophet to come into the world. What do they mean by this? You'll remember Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 15 through 19. In fact, we touched on this just last week. This should be old news to most of you. The Lord your God, this is Moses speaking to the children of Israel as they're about to pass over the Jordan into the land, that which is forbidden for him to do. They must follow now Joshua, so that they will be a people who have a shepherd, not like sheep without a shepherd. It says, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your countrymen. You shall listen to him. Now it's very clear that this is not Joshua, because Joshua was appointed already. Joshua's appointed at the end of Numbers. This occurs afterwards. Joshua has already been appointed. And so this can't be Joshua. This is a future figure, greater than Joshua. In fact, a prophet like Moses, that you must listen to him. I will raise up a prophet from among their countrymen like you, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. Well, that sounds extraordinarily like what we saw in the film just a few minutes ago, and what we read last week in chapter 5. That's exactly what Jesus was claiming about himself, that he spoke the words that God gives him. And it shall come about, here's the application, it will come about that whoever will not listen to my words, which he shall speak in my name. So in other words, if you do not just hear, but hear with the intent to obey, like Shema, Yisrael, hear, O Israel, the Lord, you must hear with the intent to obey. If you do not obey his teachings, because remember his teachings, he's speaking in my name, I've given him these teachings, he represents me to you. If you ignore him or reject him, I myself will require it of him. In other words, you'll have to take, if you ignore God's prophet like Moses, God will take it up with you personally. And I don't think you'll be happy with the results. Now, we have this other passage in Exodus. Now, we spent 8 months together in Exodus last year, less than a year ago. And you'll remember the story of the Jewish people in chapter 16. They've gone through the Red Sea. They've survived Pharaoh, and they've gone through, they've got the freedom. And just a few days, a few weeks into their journey in the desert, they begin to grumble. They begin to murmur. They begin to whine. They begin to complain. I'm hungry. And so they cry out. Moses says, this is what the Lord says. In the morning, you will be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. This is the voice of the Lord speaking. Moses is recording this. This is how you're going to know I am the covenant God. I am Jehovah, your God. Because in the morning, you will be filled with bread. When your bellies are full, then you will know who's in charge and who provides for you. Well, a couple of verses later, when the sons of Israel saw it, the manna next morning comes. And they saw it, they said, what is it? For they did not know what it was. That's why they called it manna. What is? And Moses said to them, it is the bread which the Lord, with the covenant God, which Jehovah has given you to eat. And you know what they did with that bread? Every man gathered as much as he could eat. In other words, they ate and they were filled with the bread that the covenant God provided for them. It would take a level of obtuseness unmeasurable to miss the connection that John is drawing in chapter 6 between Jesus providing the bread and Moses being the conduit of God's blessing for his people. Furthermore, it seems that, and maybe what Jesus says in later weeks, later in this passage, it's a very long chapter, what Jesus says will bear this out. It would seem to me just from casual reading that not only is John seeming to make a connection between Jesus and Moses, but the actions of Jesus and the actions of the covenant God of Israel on behalf of the people. This is how you'll know that I am the Lord. This is the sign. When your bellies are filled with the bread I provide. Why do all four Gospels record this particular passage? I think this is why. It's a very clear statement that not only do we have the second Moses, we have the incarnation of God in human flesh. God himself has come down. Well, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have a little bit of discrepancy. Is the prophet, is that the one like Moses, is that the Messiah, or are they separate? That's why you see throughout John, are you the prophet? Are you Elijah? Are you the Messiah? You see this differentiation because they haven't. Not everybody has pressed the prophet like Moses and the Messiah together, identifying them as both. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the community rule, you see they shall govern themselves using the original precepts by which the men of the Yechat, that's the community at Qumran, the guys who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, began to be instructed. Doing so, here's the point, doing so until there come the prophet and the messiahs of Aaron and Israel. So the Dead Sea Scroll community, they had the prophet like Moses who's going to come, and then they had two messiahs, a suffering messiah and a victorious messiah, a kingly Davidic messiah. So you see that spelled out right there in one of the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. It's there for everybody to see now on the internet, is right there. But more interesting to me is a rabbinical statement that is found in a midrash. This is like 3rd century. This is like 200 years, maybe 250 years after the time of the Gospels, but it records an earlier tradition. When the rabbis are recording their traditions, this is a discussion that is based on Ecclesiastes, which is called Kohelet in Hebrew. And so this is the Kohelet Rabbah, the great midrash, the great sermon collection on Ecclesiastes 1:9. And in this passage, it says, Reb Berechiah said in the name of Reb Yitzhak. In other words, this is a rabbi who's recording the teaching of the rabbi that he learned from. And Reb Yitzhak said, the last Redeemer, in other words, the final Redeemer, will be just as the first. To which I, as a reader, say, Reb Yitzhak, tell me more. Just as it says of the first Redeemer. He's going to quote an Old Testament scripture and another Old Testament. So first Redeemer, second Redeemer. Okay? First Redeemer, Messiah. Just as it says of the first Redeemer, so Moses took his wife and his sons, mounted them on a donkey. That's Exodus 4:20. So too, the last, the final Redeemer, will do the same. As it says, humble and riding a donkey. Zechariah 9:9. That's riding an ass for those of you reading the King James. But either way, you have Moses and the Messiah united together in Jewish theology, in rabbinical teaching right here in Kohelet Rabbah. And just as the first, I'll give you another example, he says, just as the first Redeemer brought down the manna, this is the passage that's particularly relevant to us, just as Moses, the first Redeemer, brought down the manna, as it says, behold, I'm going to rain down from you bread from heaven, Exodus 16:4. So too, the last, the final Redeemer, will bring down manna, quoting Psalm 72:16. May there be, as it says, may there be an abundance of grain in the land. So Moses rode a donkey, Messiah will ride a donkey. Moses brought bread, Messiah will bring bread. And finally, just as the first Redeemer brought up the well, brought water from the well. Remember, Moses hit the rock, spoke to the rock first, different episode, hit it. So too the final Redeemer will bring up the water. As it says from Joel 4, and a spring will issue from the house of the Lord and will water the valley of Shittim. So, rabbinic theology tying together Moses and the Messiah, John is doing the same. 250 years, or maybe in John's writing, 200 years earlier. Same idea. And certainly I love this last one because you know how important water, the concept of water is in John. You've seen it thus far, chapter 7. You're going to see a whole nother level of importance of water in the Gospel of John. So the people look at this guy and say, he's the prophet who's going to come. And more than that, do you remember bread machines, right? The George Foreman bread machine, right? He's a bread machine. He's a living, breathing bread machine. We want as much bread as we want. All you can follow this guy. In fact, put him in charge, maybe. Yeah, that's the ticket. Put him in charge, and then we'll have bread, all the bread that we can eat for life. So Jesus, perceiving that they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. The passage ends here because Jesus realizes, once again, I'm doing something and the people misunderstand the intent. They miss the mark of what I'm trying to get them to understand. And they're jumping to proclaim me as king. And that is not why I am here in this Advent, at this time, at this moment. They want to give him a crown. That, by the way, is a ancient replica of an ancient Roman crown, gold laurel, available at the John Paul Getty Museum shop, $100. This is the same thing. Amazon, $5. Just FYI, in case you were shopping in the market. Right? They want to proclaim him king. What is the deal with Moses and proclaiming him king? And where are they making this? Well, it has to do again with Passover. Passover is the necessary connection here. Because for the Jewish people, Passover, the time of the Gospels, was like the 4th of July. It was not just a religious holiday, it was a national holiday. It was independence, and it was freedom, and it was liberty. And, well, important message when you're occupied by the Roman oppressors. They want a king to liberate them, and freedom for all. And Yeshua understands that he's not trying to make revolutionaries. He's not a Spartacus. He's not a Bar Kokhba. He's not a revolutionary. This is not the way to bring liberation to the lives of his sheep. It is not through warfare against Rome. It is by warfare with Satan and with death that we find liberation. One final connection, and we'll leave it here. This is a connection between, you'll remember in John, they first start out asking John, interrogating John, are you Elijah? They ask him, are you the Messiah? Are you the prophet? But they first ask, are you Elijah? Right? Because all these guys are conflated together. And you remember, maybe you won't remember because this is a kind of a unique passage that very few people read. When's the last time you've done your devotions in 2 Kings? Don't raise your hands, it's okay. Now a man came from Baal Shalisha. Congratulations on saying that correctly. He brought the man of God, brought Elisha. Bread, the first fruits. They're in the northern kingdom. They can't bring their first fruits to the priests in Jerusalem. They're stuck with a false religious system. So they bring their first fruits to the prophet, to the school of the prophets. And so they give it to Elijah. 20 loaves of barley. Again, it's poor man's bread. Fresh ears of grain in a sack. And he said, well, give them to the people. You've got a whole school of prophets here. Give them to the people that they may eat. This is my first fruit offering. And so Elisha's attendant says, Gehazi, you remember this guy. His attendant said, what? This is a Jewish kid, what? Will I set this 20 loaves of barley and some ears of grain? Will I set this before 100 men? You expect me to feed 100 guys, hungry prophetic men, with just a few loaves and a little grain? What will I set this before 100 men? But Elisha says this, give them to the people. Give them, the people, that they may eat. For thus says Jehovah, they shall eat and have some left over. So he set it before them, and the school of the prophets, the 100 men. They ate, and they had some left over, according to the word of the Lord. So, thrown in for nothing, no extra charge, we not only have Jesus as the second Moses in John chapter 6, we not only have Jesus doing the same thing the Lord does, but we have Jesus doing something greater than Elisha the prophet did back in the time of the kings. So where does this leave us? What shall we walk away with? We're certainly not walking away with bread. We're not walking away with fish. What we walk away with is the confident knowledge, not just knowledge, but the confident knowledge, that just as Messiah can fulfill the needs of the people of Israel, so too he can meet our needs. His abilities are far beyond those of mortal men. His abilities are those of our God. And our God loves us enough, what, to give us a meal? No. That's the catalyst for the lesson. Our God loves us enough to send us his Son to live a life among his people, a life of holiness and separateness and perfection, moral perfection, so that it can climax in a miserable, humiliating level of suffering and death. But after 3 days, our Messiah rose from the dead. Feeding 20,000 people, that's worth more than 200 denarii. Saving all who put their trust in his identity and his actions on our behalf, giving the right to become children of God for all who believe, that, my friends, is priceless. We'll continue next time and see what next occurs in chapter 6. It's another fave. Don't miss it. You can cheat if you want and read ahead, but don't miss next week.